okay? Can start. Okay. I look and I see, I titled this, We Survived the Hurricane, but I'm easily distracted because I didn't write anything about about the hurricane we survived, which was in the Netherlands in 1995, by the way. But my life has been filled with memorable experiences, according to my friends Glenn and John Verano, who are my decision makers in healthcare matters. And recently they asked me to write my life history because, and this is a quote, "You have had such an interesting life." So indeed they might be right. My life has never been dull, and I'd be happy to take some dullness now. But I grew up in a town in northern Colorado, a town named Greeley, after Horace Greeley, who put together a group of people who wanted to found a utopian community in the territory of Louisiana, and then Nebraska. It had 4 names, which later became the state of Colorado in 1876, thereby acquiring the nickname of the Centennial State. And Greeley is the town that James Michener wrote about in his book Centennial. And there was a 24-hour television series of the same name. Greeley in the 50s and 60s was a quiet college town. The fence put around it by early settlers was gone, but Greeley was still dry and moral. All the bars and houses of ill repute grew up in a circle around Greeley's city limits. The cattle feeders got in there among them, and Greeley had a certain odor much of the time. The largest feedlot in the world is still there and was the subject of a PBS documentary recently. My life in Greeley was pretty ordinary, and I formed friendships in the 2nd grade when we moved to Greeley that I still value. All my life, I have felt the support of people in Greeley, no matter where I lived or what I did. Most of my teachers from all levels of school came to my wedding in Denver. Now, what Gwen Verano calls the interesting part of my life began in 1965, when I went to live in England, and I lived in East End, London, when it was quite different from what everyone saw in the Olympic TV coverage this past summer. And then went to France, southern Belgium, and Suisse Romande, the French-speaking areas of Europe. I had left college in Boulder, where I had gone to ski, basically, at the end of my freshman year in 1963 to go to work at the Denver Post. And then I decided to go to Europe with Operation Mobilization, a non-denominational evangelistic organization, which is now worldwide, has several ships and workers in every country in the world. But then it was in its early stages. So when I lived in France, I often lived with families. I was with a team, but also stayed with families and was invited out a lot because I was a blonde American with a red hat, I think. And I learned to cook with fresh foods there, to go to the market every day. And I also learned to eat first and then ask what it was later. Post-World War II Europe saw scarcities, so cuisine was often brains and tripe, also horse meat, lapin, which is rabbit, and liver that they broiled and left kind of rare, and it was considered a delicacy by probably everyone but me. The steak and kidney pie in England was nothing compared to French food in that time, so I often prayed for grace just to be able to eat it, and especially rabbit, and that goes back to when I was 5 years old, living in the summer on my grandparents' ranch near Durango, Colorado, and we ate rabbit one night for dinner. That wasn't that unusual. But I had spent all day trying to find my black bunny. And then they told me after dinner that we had eaten him. So to me, rabbit has tasted like rubber ever since then, and it's really hard to eat, no matter how you cook it. But my parents and grandparents learned that day that if they were going to eat one of my animals, and later we did eat my lamb, they'd better involve me in the killing. So Ruth Ellen is was always involved in whatever animal was butchered and processed. So I did eat all the rabbit I was offered in France, but it was difficult. And there's a reason that you have to eat what French people give you. They spend nearly, and still this is true, this was certainly true in 1965, they spend nearly half their income on food and wine. So you do not offend a French person, anybody who's going to France, by refusing what they offer. And that led, one time my whole team got drunk because they were offered too much wine, and I was a little bit slower drinker, so they didn't refill me as much. And I was the only one who wasn't drunk, so I had to do the dishes. That was my punishment. So, my experiences on OM prepared me to marry a European. When Ed Vondermas came to teach Greek and theology at Colorado Christian University, a number of people started praying right when he came that we would meet and marry, and indeed that's what happened. They were prophetic. Ed grew up in post-war Netherlands, having survived hunger winter in Rotterdam and other post-war deprivations. He did have malnutrition like a lot of kids after the war, but was otherwise healthy. And just an aside, my brother-in-law, who is the Dean of the College of Medicine at University of Rotterdam, has tracked all these kids who had malnutrition after the war, and they're actually healthier and longer lived than most people. So, what can I say? Anyway, I remember in 1952 that we had this big food drive for these poor little Dutch kids because there were floods that devastated the Netherlands. Maybe some of you remember that. So I always figured maybe Ed ate what I had sent. But anyway, I had gone back to Greeley from Denver to stay with my parents when I met Ed. I had become ill. I was hospitalized with something like toxic shock syndrome in summer of 1968 and was on the way to recovery when I contracted mono in the hospital because of lack of sanitation, I guess. So I had to go to Greeley and rest at my parents' home.